Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 77 of the ITSM crowd. This is our third episode today. We actually have 5 episodes scheduled this week, which is an absolute first for all of us here. But the reason that we're doing this is to talk about a new publication and hear from some of the authors who contributed to that publication. So 2020 has been an unusual year. I think we can all say that. A lot of terrible things have happened, and also this has had a huge impact on how we live and how we work, which many of us have kind of struggled to adapt to. So when I was thinking about that, I had this kind of vision in my head of organizations being broken into pieces, but then starting to think about, how do we put those pieces back together? Does it have to be the same picture that we reassemble at the end of all of this, which is where the idea for the Jigsaw organization came about. And the Jigsaw organization, you can see the link here, is a free publication that you can download. And basically it's a series of articles from some of the best, most innovative thinkers in the management, IT service management, leadership space, to give you some inspiration and to give you some ideas about how you might actually evolve your organization and how you work as a result of everything that you've seen this year. So we've had 3 episodes today. We've got 2 more on Friday. You can just see the timetable there. And we've also got another 2 early November. So on the 5th of November, we've got a couple more episodes as well. But I really would recommend, if you haven't downloaded the Jigsaw organization, go get yourself a copy. And in this little series of ITSM crowds, we're talking to some of the authors and the contributors. So the first thing I'm going to do to kick us off is ask this panel to introduce themselves. So Patty, I'm going to come to you first, please, to tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, thank you. I have a company called Global Sway, and it's a boutique consulting firm that kind of strikes a balance between technology and humanity. We provide C-suite leaders, IT leaders with coaching and training and digital leadership and organizational change. So transformation's kind of my thing. Been doing that for about 12 years, and absolutely love being on the human side of technology.
Fantastic, thank you. And Simone?
Easiest way to learn about me is look at LinkedIn. Snapshot bio. My work involves supporting the journey of organizations and individuals in adapting and humanizing IT. Patty and I fall on the human side of most things. But most of my work involves blending the different business and technology frameworks, whether it's consulting, workshopping, coaching, training, that type of thing. But it's really about helping people to find their way forward, so that not just living in the different contexts that we have, but also thriving regardless of how volatile or dynamic and, it's ever-changing world now. So if I like to focus on how, and I am going to pay homage to Patty here, she calls me a boundary-busting human connector. And really about trying to help humans flourish in the technology world.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. And Simone, to come to you first, because when you sent me your article, we chose that one very deliberately to be the first one in the Jigsaw organization, because it really, to me, set the context for everything else that was going to follow it. So talk to me a little bit about how organizations have been challenged this year, and a little bit more about the themes in your article.
I found it really interesting that when you first proposed what this publication was about and gave the core synopsis of what you wanted to focus on. And the first thing that came to my mind is, when you take, especially those really huge 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 piece boxes of jigsaw puzzles, and you just throw it on the table, and there are pieces everywhere. So my title, Gone to Pieces, kind of came about just from that imagery that you had in your synopsis. What I really found then, if I'm thinking about how that comes together, I thought I'll go back to history. And so I really had a good think about how puzzles work and what is a jigsaw all about? What does it tell us? How does it educate us? What are the formulas involved in that? And one of the things that really came to mind is how much business approaches usually involve what we call dissectology, which is actually the art of puzzle assembly. And although that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's still a very narrow view of what organizations have been through and are going through right now. So we ended up with like a cookie cutter formula for most businesses. And as a result of that, it trapped us into looking at things in just certain particular ways. It was very hard to break out of that. So that challenge was really to, we can, learn lessons from other people and that sort of thing, but really you need to live lessons to really understand what they're about, which is why I love the workshops and going through the coaching and that type of thing. And although we can stay focused on our present, those small actions that we take to trigger our larger changes, the things we want to achieve, really comes into the other theme that I have in the article, which is around the art of the possible. That being able to assess and adapt to the intensity and the nature of the change that we're facing is a long-term art in experiencing both our nature and the chaos or human chaos that's involved. For me, it's very, an organization is built by individual souls, and it's actually the changes within the people that reflect what goes on in the society of the organization or the culture of the organization. And in turn, that's reflected in what we see as the organization's skyline. When we look at the outside of an organization, look at that skyline, that's actually a reflection of both its culture and what's happening with its people. And if we look at what is possible, then we can create what we a metamorphosis. So that's the final theme I have that runs in the article, in helping people build their resilience, move into that art of the possible, and then provide them, for me, some very critical things about hope, curiosity, desire, the courage, but also the capability to create, the what if, but even moving beyond the what if, because we can open up your imagination. We need to do that. We need to be able to play with ideas in relative safety. It's incredibly important part of planning to be able to do that. But once we've sort of gone past the what if, then what I really want to challenge people to do is add the extra phrase, even if, whatever the current context is, even if they have to challenge themselves to act and move beyond that. And for me, the even if XYZ is happening, what is the action that's going to get taken? So imagination to action, I guess.
I love it. And I think that is one thing that this year has given us. And I'll just say now while I remember, because I had forgotten. The people that are watching us live, you can ask Simone and Patty questions using the YouTube comments. We can bring those in. So if there's anything specific that you want to ask them about the things that we talk about, pop them in the YouTube comments. We will pick them up. In fact, I see we have one here. So question from Vishal. Thank you, Vishal. How do you both think that leadership will need to change at the organisational level during and most importantly after the pandemic? And Patty, maybe I'll ask you to kick us off on that one, please.
You bet. The important thing to understand is kind of the phases that we're going through. So when the pandemic first hit, we were looking at one of the most sensational proportional events in the world, and that required us to take some action. And some of the leadership qualities that were required then were authority, authenticity, empathy, trust, security, making sure everything was stabilized. And that's the first stage. And actually the model that we presented through the jigsaw puzzle. But there are some transitional ways to lead that we're going to have to tap into. And Simone and I have done a lot of talking about growth mindset, where you're focused on inquiry and being vulnerable enough to be inclusionary and look at systems thinking, look at the whole system, because we are in the biggest experiment globally, especially in IT, that has ever been able to be produced. And what we're learning from this is quite remarkable. As we move through, the systems thinking piece, that's all experimentation. We have to be willing to open the doors to experimentation, right? And then moving forward, it's going to be a few, we call our model future forward growth, because it has to be strategic, visionary, and we have to communicate an action oriented and inspiring and decisive and inviting environment for the people around us. And I think that leadership is going to change in that we have the opportunity to flip everything, but still understand that we have to maintain certain foundations within the business. But I think the focus is going to shift completely. I believe that we're going to have to invest heavily in reskilling. I believe that we're going to have to pay a lot of attention to what people are doing. Pay attention in your own life. Where are you eating? How are you eating out? What does it look like now? What are the changes being made? Because that's going to shift business. So if you're in the hospitality industry, everything has changed. If you're in the event industry, everything has changed. And all the technical pieces of that are going to have to be managed differently. And I think leaders are going to have to open up the door to learning in ways they haven't had before. So what got you here isn't what's going to get you there, as Marshall Goldsmith would say. So I think that one shift that's going to be really relevant is getting the data from the front lines that have never been part of your reporting before. Really understand movement, what your customers are doing, what people are doing, how the organization is functioning. And so some focus and investment on wellness, coaching, the ability to bring someone in to make sure that your people are moving through the shift properly, looking at organizational structure. Does it actually even support a new model? So those are the areas where I see leadership taking a complete shift.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Simone.
I definitely agree. The business models are shifting. And I think that if the way in which we're going to be operating business, our leadership is also changing. And it's almost a chicken and egg conversation, isn't it? Because the leaders are going to shift the business model, but the business model is being forced to shift by the context of what's happening in the world. So it's really quite interesting. Patty hit on a few things that are really a favorite for me. Regardless of the business model you end up with, something that's going to be really critical here is the competency transformation. And I really do like the focus not just on skill sets, which is shifting because of new technologies and things that we have, but our competency takes it much further than that. We've talked about T-shaped professionals before. There's E-shaped professionals. There's a whole host of stuff that's changing, I guess, in the HR space around our human capability and our capacity to do things. As a leader, every next level that we're going through is going to demand a different version of you. Now, I don't know who said that, but I love that whole concept and thought pattern, that there is a different version of us evolving now. And that, I think, means that as leaders, we're going to have to be taking on new skills. And there's a greater, more in-depth focus on this humanizing side of technology now. So emotional intelligence we're taking it beyond some of the rigidity that we've known in emotional intelligence previously to emotional agility. So it's really a very interesting area of application now in what's happening of what we regarded previously as, I think I've heard Claire, you use this, the woo-woo stuff.
Yeah, the fluffy stuff.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's soft and it's comforting in certain aspects, but it is not soft in the terms of its its difficulty in learning and application of what we need to be doing as leaders, but also providing the environment and the capability for our people to also move into that space, into the mindset and into the capability of these competencies.
And just a note from Helen, who was one of our presenters earlier today, just to say that, she thinks it's brilliant. This is a time for, I guess, leaders to step up and embrace that opportunity to evolve. So, this is clearly going to strike a chord. But I think, Patty, you mentioned your model, which I would like to come back to, because this was something that you wrote about in the Jigsaw organisation. And one of the things that I liked about it was it did kind of provide a structure and a flow which can help people to organise their thoughts. So maybe you could just talk a little bit more about that as well, please.
Sure. It was neat when we talked about, contributing to the Jigsaw organization, because this is, how do you fit those pieces together, even though it's complex and it's highly volatile and confusing and uncertain. The three shifts in change and leadership presence that go together are stabilize. So we've kind of gone through that over the last 6 months. We've watched organizations take stabilize, and not everybody's been able to do it well because of the nature of the industries they're in. But then we want to actually be stepping into, and right about now, about a month ago, and moving in for the next 6 months, we're going to be looking at sway. So what does sway mean? Sway is where you're looking at, think of it as a tree. You really need to understand what are the important foundations. So those are your roots. And then you have to take a look at the environment and what's going on, and all of the reactions and everything that's coming back to you, and be able to move a little bit like a tree does. Be flexible, be agile, be iterative. So I'll just talk a little bit about then it moving to future forward growth. And that's where we all want to be. That's the goal. And we may have been there. And then, of course, this huge, enormous, sensational, unbelievable global pandemic has opened the door to true transformation. So we have talked a lot, all of us in the industry, where we say, yes, but adding a tool isn't transformation. Transforming is really about the business, and it's about the entire organization. So we have a great, incredible opportunity right now to build a new future, or build that future forward growth. So while you were stabilizing, it was unexpected. You're working on business process, technology, safety first, looking at operational continuity, resilience. What does it look like for business health? And that leader, of course, was authoritative and authentic, and being a trustworthy source of security in a very uncertain moment. Now we're moving into sway. So we talked about the leader presence needs to have a growth mindset, inquiry, vulnerability, inclusionary systems thinking. So what does that mean? That means it's time right now where we can review and analyze and experiment and iterate from the impacts, the data, the people, the customers, the communities. And those are the leaves and the branches, right, of that tree that's swaying. And we may go this way, and we may have to move back this way, because we're iterative, we're testing, we're experimenting, and there is an investment here. And you can take current analysis and review and testing and learning as to better understand how people are moving through the next 6 months. And in this next 6 months, it doesn't seem fast enough, but really, if you're going to do it right, if you're going to transform, that analysis is highly important. And you need to care about habits of people and activities, and watch communities and see the environment, and add that to some of your internal business data, because that's going to shape where you're going. So then what does future forward growth look like? That's strategic. So you gather all of the learnings from all of the experimentation over the next 6 months of what that looks like. I mean, you've had supply chains interrupted, you've had technology advancements in organizations that weren't ready to go. And so we have to take a look back at what does cybersecurity look like? What do all of those pieces look like for a community of people who are now outside of your building? And then moving to future forward growth, you have to be strategic and visionary. You've got to be communicative, action-oriented, inspiring, decisive, inviting. So that leadership presence means you've got to take a renewed strategy, mission, roadmap, and plans for ongoing business growth. So what have we learned? What are we taking with that? And how are we launching a new strategic initiative? And that has to include your organizational structure and supports. Looking at process as it was in the current state, then looking at the future state and identifying that future state really clearly so that your learnings all keep going to that North Star every single time. So that's the model. It's 3 stages, and there's different types of leadership presence required.
It's brilliant. And when you download the Jigsaw organization, really would recommend that, almost starting by reading Simone and Patty's articles, because it's that big picture that almost opens your mind to how that change is going to evolve. I mean, Simone, anything you want to add to that? Because I know you and Patty know each other so well, work together.
Yeah, it is great because we both have great skills in specific areas that really combine well and support each other in what we're doing. When I was talking about, for example, competency transformation, that resiliency Patty mentioned is really important, that we need to be able to repurpose our capabilities and look at how we practice things. Resiliency only comes from practice. Resiliency only comes from experiencing. You can't just sort of have one trauma and go, yep, right, we got through that. That's it. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. Resilience comes from building scar tissue. This is why we have to practice things and experiment and have that agility, I guess, the capabilities that support our abilities to do that. So, for example, there's the mindful approach of kintsugi, which I mention in the article, and it's the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery. So in a case, I guess, repurposing or rebuilding, but what they do is they replace the gaps in some pieces with gold. And then it becomes a piece of artwork. So this is about also being able to embrace our flaws and our imperfections so that we have this safe space to experiment and learn. But as we do that, we become more refined. We actually become more valuable because of those scars. It's something that we should be showing off with pride, because those scars, that resiliency, means that we're not just able to survive, but any disruption, but we're actually able to thrive in the context of that journey.
I love it. And that pottery is beautiful. I've seen it. So, I mean, both of you have got transformation experience, and, it's not a shock to anyone if I kind of make the point that many transformations do not go well. What traits do you see in organizations that are able to transform? What behaviors, what culture, what's going to set organizations up for success?
The word inclusionary I used as one of the leadership presence. So inclusionary meaning we now have 5 generations of knowledge, and especially in IT, it's phenomenal. We have 5 generations of knowledge sitting in the workplace all at once. And we have the opportunity to tap in to historical and future-minded and growth-minded ideas. And I think that for transformation, the idea of removing the top-down authoritarian, right now is a fabulous time to be able to make that move, to remove that fear culture and start stepping into an experimental culture. Now, I'm not saying let's all go willy-nilly and get rid of governance, because I am a huge, huge governance fan. But I think we need to really take a look at our opportunity for success, which is leveraged by a couple of things. Interdependent organizations, definition of teams, like clear definition. So who's in charge of the transformation? Transformation is not an operational activity. Transformation is a side of that. So anyone doing transformation on the side of their desk is probably not going to be actually successful in transforming an organization. But it's looking at the whole picture. So it's people, process, and technology are the three on the triangle, but it's missing a few. We're talking about not just process, but structure, how we report, how we look at each other, everything. So the planning and analysis, how we work together, how we collaborate, the structure of interdependency, the decision-making structures, the governance, all of that needs to have some foundational footing at the roots of that tree before you can start experimenting. And then the willingness to accept experimentation. And I think that's one of the hardest. I think that's the hardest one, and why Agile and DevOps are so popular, because there are some significant pieces to being able to grow and scale quickly, and you can only do that through experimentation. And maybe you're doing A/B testing, maybe you're doing a single experiment, but if you want to grow and scale quickly with the organization, and right now most people, due to fiscal issues from the pandemic, would be wise to consider the experimentation model.
Yeah, and I think nice comment here from Helen as well about learning without judgment, which is so important. I don't know if both of you have seen, but we've had there's been a big issue with our test and trace system in the UK, which is basically down to an Excel spreadsheet running out of columns. But for me, it's never right to be pointing the finger at the technology or a single person, and I would love to understand how they will learn from that. But I think, Simone, if I can bring you in at this point as well, about what you see in organizations that transform successfully.
I think the difference I've seen between the ones that work and the ones that don't is their understanding of the difference between optimizing and transforming. I think that's a really critical balance they need to understand. It's not that we don't need to optimize. The quicker, greener, cheaper, faster, that's always a good thing. Are we doing the old things in new ways? Technology has allowed for that. And that's still growth, and it's still change in the way in which we're working. That next level then of understanding that that's still going on, because we want to keep being lean, we want to keep being agile, so we still have that focus there. But we then need to evolve and expand into, wow, I didn't realize that we can do something we couldn't do before. That's another level of thinking. That's when we're really entering a transformational mode of going, wow, what can I do with this? How is this going to make a difference to us? That's when I love the whole emerging technology side of things. What does it mean we are able to do now or in the coming months that will make a difference to what we do and how we work? And then there's that, sandcastle imagination. Who said a sandcastle has to look like, let's dump the sand in and turn it over, I've got a couple of turrets, to look at the sand sculpting competitions? Who said a sandcastle had to look just that way? So that I think that difference between understanding what is being optimized versus what is actually being transformed is a really critical path to the success. But in addition to that, and it's one of my bugbears, but it's one of my favorite areas, is knowledge management. We've got to stop thinking of it as purely an article to solve a technical problem. Knowledge management industry as a profession has been around a lot longer than creating a knowledge article for tech. So it needs to be at the core of the strategy, because we can't be experimental, we can't make the decisions without having knowledge management built deeply into the strategy across the whole organization. It is dynamic, living, breathing stuff that we make our decisions of day to day. So we do need to make sure that we're looking after our circulation, if you like.
And that, I think, is a perfect place. These 30 minutes are getting faster and faster, I'm sure. Time is very strange in 2020. But if you've been watching this, thank you for the comments. Really appreciate those. Love seeing the questions come in. And I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to answer quite all of them. If you have watched this and thought, I need more Patty and Simone in my life, then you can see them every Friday on their own YouTube channel, which is Keep the Learning On, with a couple of other excellent people. The links for this are underneath the YouTube episode as well, so don't worry about, not grabbing the link off the screen, but you can see Patty and Simone every Friday. You can also learn more about Patty's work on the Global Sway website, and SimoneJomo.com is where you will go to find her. We've got 2 more episodes of the ITSM crowd this week. We've got Rob England, Cherry Vu, Alex Yenin, Daniel Breston, Nicholas Fredrickson and Nicola Gaderoff joining us. And we're going to cover everything from changes in management style to agile service management and minimum viable agile, which I'm looking forward to learning more about. But for today, thank you so much, Patty and Simone, for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who's been watching and chatting. And I will see you all on the next episode of the ITSM crowd. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Claire. It's been great.